Hey everybody, Ben here from the archive, and I guess I'm kind of obligated to discuss this one. This being episode number 100 of Archive, Commodore 64. And I guess I'll just start at the beginning here. Starting around episode 93 or so, I started to hear from viewers about, episode 100's coming up, and then it became, oh man, episode 100 is going to be so awesome. And then it became, it better be good. And so I initially, I really, even though I knew it was on the horizon, I really just wasn't all that interested in doing a special. I had already hit my big milestone as far as I was concerned, being a number 69, because, cheap jokes are king. So, it became, okay, well, I'm going to have to do something, but what am I going to do? I don't have any ideas here. And so I figured, well, I could just absolutely troll the hell out of everybody and just skip from 99 to 101. Then I just wouldn't do it at all. And maybe somewhere down the line, if the mood struck, I'd do 100. But that wasn't going to work. So I thought, well, how about we jump from 99 to 1,000? Which opened up its own can of worms, which was because, okay, well, doing the math, it's at 25, 26 episodes a year. And if I were to do this at the same rate, how long would it take me to hit 1,000? 40 years. So I wound up splitting the difference, I guess you could say, and I made it 20 years so I could make it about the 1,000th overall archive video. So it would be including the Ben's junks and the archive riffs and stuff. So there you go with that. And then it became, okay, so what would I be doing 20 years down the pike? And the thought just really depressed me that I'd still be making archive in 2036, that I'd be doing this show for 20 odd years, because let's face it, that's not exactly a big career high. I mean, I know archive really has its fans, but it's never really gotten all that big. I'm just being perfectly honest here. So it got me thinking about just kind of futility, and also it got me going on the whole idea of these actors and stuff who you see at the comic conventions and stuff. They were in their one movie 20, 30, 40 years ago, and now they're spending their lives going from convention to convention signing autographs for $10 a pop. And so I started going with that, and I was like, okay, well, I haven't even scaled those heights, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that I had. Okay, what would I be doing? Because archive probably wouldn't be much bigger by then. So, something, I'd have to be doing something to make ends meet, and of course I didn't want it to be just a normal day job, just for entertainment's sake. So, the idea became, okay, so well, there's that show on TV, The World's Dumbest Criminals, and you've got all these people from the 70s, 80s, and 90s who are now sitting there telling bad jokes over these videos. And I thought, well, okay, that's an idea, but you know, let's just, since this is already a depressing thought, let's just go for the throat here. And so what I wound up coming up with was the idea that even though Archive isn't explicitly a nostalgia show, there's certainly enough of it that, well, that'll be what sticks with everyone in the long run, and that'll be the albatross hanging around my neck. So my idea then became, okay, well, you've got some of those shows like I Love the 70s, I Love the 80s. Well, by that time it'll be I Love the tens or teens, which became a joke in and of itself. And so I went with that, and I'd be doing the voiceovers for this, and okay, what's the big nostalgic thing gonna be? And just in the name of convenience, I picked internet memes. And okay, what's the dumbest internet meme I can think of? D's nuts. Okay, let's do that. And I also put in a few little jabs at what I fear for the future. It's going to be interesting to go back and listen to this in 20 years. But I had this idea that people's attention spans are just going to keep getting shorter and shorter, and the idea of things like complete sentences might be starting to go away. And so I figured, well, the show will just be not only to keep the joke intact, but it'll just be a really super short show because that's all that people can stand. But also, I guess I kind of contradicted myself. I had this idea that, okay, what's the most degrading thing that I could be doing? And so I tend to have these ideas where I think, man, that's a really funny idea. And then it turns out to really be a thing. So I came up with something that I think might wind up being a thing, and that is, well, I'll be stuck reading nostalgic erotic fiction, keeping the whole nostalgia thing going in there. And so that's what it became. And admittedly, I figured, okay, well, what's the big book? Well, 50 Shades of Grey, that's a no-brainer. So I found a copy of that in a thrift store bin, which was not hard at all, because I see that one all the time. So I just went on sale day and picked one up at half price, and I going through the sketch here some more. This is going to take a while, because I have a lot to say about just the opening. I started reading the book a little, and I knew going in by reputation that it wasn't a very well written book. And so I just went, maybe I'll just skim through it. Oh, and a quick side note here, this opening with Pavand. The reason why the picture is so bad on this is because it took a long time to get the proper cables for better looking stuff, and so when I first got the Commodore, all I had was a Nintendo RF adapter, and so that's why it's all fuzzy. But getting back to the opening, very long opening sketch, okay, so 50 Shades of Grey is going to be the thing. I didn't really want to read it, but I skimmed through it and just, of course, looked for the dirtiest part, and also dumbest part. And I found it about halfway through the book, and so that became part of it. And then just the sketch overall, the making of the sketch, there was a good amount of thought put into it because at one point I thought, I'll just make a whole episode out of episode 1000. There just won't even really be a topic per se. It'll just be this a very, very extended sketch. Which I thought the better of eventually, but I had grown so attached to it that I thought, well, you've all waited this long for episode 100. You can handle 6 or 7 minutes getting into it. So, the making of the sketch itself was actually a pretty long process. It took me a while because I'm not much of an actor, and so I had to try and get into it as best as I could. And I just got lucky, switching gears slightly here. It was kind of a gloomy day when I did that, a very gloomy morning. And so there was this very gray look. And so I was able to use that. And I intentionally kept the camera a little dark. And for the box, the whole idea of being stuck with nostalgia. So I made a copy of the Infinite Ben picture that I used from time to time. Only now I'm just clinging to it, and I've used it so many times that it's all rumpled up, and the box is now crooked, and that sort of thing. The box can be crooked in general. Sometimes I don't catch it, but that time it was deliberately crooked. And I'm not much of a makeup person either, so the only stabs I had at passing myself off as being in my 50s was I just wound up taking some baby powder and putting it in my hair, and being the very ambitious guy that I am, I only put it around the sides because I knew I wasn't going to be ducking down too much and I wasn't going to be poking my head up or anything, so I just did those parts. And I don't know why I didn't think of this, but baby powder is messy, and so it was just all over my shoulders, and I spent half of it it would kind of keep coming off, and I'd have to keep wiping off my shoulders, and I think it kind of came off in some area, and my current natural hair color is still showing through. But so that's how I did the makeup, and then of course, the glasses, that's a pair of dollar store readers that I don't normally wear glasses, but once in a blue moon, if I've been sitting at the computer for a really long time and the eye strain is really getting bad, but I just have to finish something, if I really need it, I have the pair of very low level cheaters, and that's what I was wearing there. But normally I don't wear glasses, and knock on wood, hopefully I don't for a good while yet. So there's that. And then the idea of, okay, archive is still going on 20 years in the future. Okay, so what will I be discussing? Well, knowing me, I'll be so set in my ways because that's just how I am. I'm such a creature of habit that I'll still be mining the 70s, 80s, and 90s mostly. So I had found the Danny Bonaducci album in a thrift store bin, and I had been sitting on it, and I was like, but I would like to do this. I know there's a lot of bad celebrity albums out there, but the more famous ones or infamous ones have been reissued, and the less known ones have not, of course, not been reissued, but they're also very tough to come by. And I'm thinking, well, I might not ever get to this, so, because it could take me another 20 years to cobble together enough of those things. Some of them are just so rare. So I just decided that, okay, I'm going to do this and put it in the episode, and that's what I'm going to be discussing. It's going to be bad celebrity albums. And it would have been nice to spent a little more time with it, but as I was coming along and writing that long sketch and knowing that I wasn't going to make a whole episode out of it, I decided not to do a full review of the whole album. I just made it that last little bit. Okay, so finally getting into the Commodore 12 minutes in, and initially I just didn't have any ideas. I had my list of things. I try and keep a list of things for just when the ideas aren't really popping, and I had been looking at doing an episode on abandonware for a while. And I thought, well, yeah, I could do that, but it'd be nice just to have a little more focus so I could give the episode a little more direction. So, the Commodore 64 was something that I had my eye on at one point, and I just wound up going through with it. And the Patreon donations really helped there because this was far and away the most expensive archive episode, even more so than, say, the ham radio episode or the Philips CDI episode. There's a little slide way back in the beginning that said I had spent $900. I didn't spend quite that much, but I spent more than I care to admit. And I was just, once I finally got the thing, it was just kind of a problem. It still needed, at least the peripherals, once I finally got them, still needed a little fixing, which kind of ticked me off because as far as I knew, I was getting stuff that was already in proper working order. So that wound up being some extra time. And then it got to the point where I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything about the programs for this stuff. Oh my God. So I reached out to my friend Ben from Classical Gas Emissions, who's really is a old school computer geek, and he had all these discs and all these ideas, and so he offered to run off a bunch of what he thought were the worst in his collection, and he sent them to me, and I asked him to express mail them to me, and I wound up paying him back for it. So that's how that happened. And then just on a side note here, another idea I was kicking around was that maybe I just won't host this episode because I am so into this and I just got to get my money's worth that I'm just gonna have the Commodore host the episode and I'll just type everything and you'll just read it. And obviously I saw very quickly that wasn't gonna stick, so I just built it into the episode. But anyway, Ben's stuff. I could do another episode on the discs that he sent me. He sent me some really out there stuff. And so I had that going for me. And then I just knew ahead of time, just by reputation, that the Commodore 64 had a lot of adult software of varying degrees of legitimacy. And so I just started, I got the best emulator, the one that irritated me the least and the one that I could actually figure out the most. And so I got that, and I just preemptively did a segment because I knew that this was going to be something that was going to be kind of expected of me. So I did that, and of course, this was a very, very long episode to make. It's good that I had worked ahead prior to this episode because it gave me a good, nice running start. But anyway, there's somebody using a brick saw outside, by the way. Uh, I Before I even contacted Ben, I was just thinking, well, maybe I can just get some discs and just see what I get. And so I just went on eBay, got a random lot of discs, and that's what you're seeing here. And most of it was, my thought was really what you saw in the episode here. Why does this exist? This does not need to be a thing. Why would I need a computer program to tell me how to balance my personal checkbook? I think even back then, if I had a payroll or something, that I would probably have an accountant or something. So I was just astounded at just how seemingly pointless a lot of the software was. Of course, I stretched it a bit, like the list manager. I suppose you could come up with some much more useful things, but of course, just the way my gears turn is okay, well, okay, I'll just write a list of things. This is a list. Isn't this so exciting? So that's where that came from. And there were some games in that lot too that I was considering discussing, but I knew the episode was going to get really long. And so a lot of stuff just got cut off. Not just software, but I was going to do a segment in which we actually take a look at the computer itself, but I wound up making a Ben's junk out of that because it was just, I knew the episode was just getting too big to handle. So I finally got the episode all together, and I was feeling pretty decent about it. I still wasn't too thrilled about even the very notion of episode 100, but I felt like I had just accrued slowly enough ideas that I could sustain a good episode out of, in my opinion. So the other thing was I knew that I was, because I initially was going to be the anti-special when I was actually starting to write it, that the whole skipping to episode 1000 thing, and I knew that once I did that I was going to take some crap for it, and I knew that especially if it was something that I felt like archive viewers would want to see, like the Commodore 64, to just dangle it over their heads for so long, I knew that wasn't gonna really go over real well. But the fallout from this episode was interesting. So, on the one hand, it absolutely shattered my first day view count record up until that point, and who knows, maybe it'll get broken again, but it just shattered that record, and I thought, okay, well, that's nice. But I look at it, and there's a good bit more dislikes than usual, and I'm going, yeah, okay, yeah, I kind of expect that. I'm sure there were going to be some viewers that weren't too happy about, presumably the opening segment, but the weirdest part of all was, let me just say here that the timing was really, really bad in the end for this episode, because just the 4 or 5 days before it dropped, there was a death in the family, and I had to go out of town, out of state, and try and help take care of that, and attend the funeral and all that. And so the episode came out while I was away, and I wasn't really monitoring it that close, but I would just check very briefly at some point during the day just to see how things were going. And I was kind of surprised to get an email over this from the mother of a teenage boy that watches Archive. And Archive was never intended to be a kids show anyway, but I do try and make some concessions. Having said that, there are times where it's just for me to not go into some of the areas that I do would be selling the whole idea short. And so I just always have to go that, well, if you're watching Archive at all, hopefully you're old enough, but also just if you're a kid watching it, that you're hip enough, that you're mature enough, that you can handle that life isn't all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. And so, anyway, this email that I got from this mom was she was all upset at me for I don't know if she watched it or not. I get the feeling she probably didn't, but was upset at me for swearing so much and all the. It sounded like most of the anger was concentrated to the first few minutes. There was nothing specific though, so that made it a little tough. And of course, the timing was just bad. I just like, do I really want to read this right now? But I got the thing, and I was just really surprised. So you're upset about by way of your kid. Okay, so your kid might. I believe it said her kid was autistic. Okay, well, this is still contextually appropriate. This is still what, in my mind, given the circumstances that I've come up with, this would still be appropriate. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where you can't please everybody, can you? So I've said my piece on the episode for the most part here, and I guess I'll just discuss some of these games as they go along here just to flesh things out. So the one that's just wrapping up here with the fireworks and the Mozart music and stuff, it got me thinking. Some people just have way, way, way too much time on their hands because I just couldn't figure out why this was even a thing. And of course, I already went through that with the boring software bit. Nice glitch screen there. But I just couldn't turn down the idea of having a what's that called? A hot air balloon getting shot down in a fireworks display because, of course, they always fly through fireworks displays. Okay, and before that, it was the turn up the volume and wait. And when I first saw that, I just went, no. I turned it way down, thinking it was going to be some just horrible noise that would just knock me out of the room. But it wasn't, and I actually, I don't think I tweaked the volume. I think that's really the volume that it was at. Now, this Barbie game, this is the only real major thing, as far as I know, in the episodes. Anything that sold much of anything by the standards of what it is. And it was kind of weird because when I first started playing it, silly Benny boy, I'm thinking, okay, so the game starts with I get a call from Ken, and he wants me to go to the prom with her, and it just happens to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're gonna go to a prom really early. Okay, whatever. But in my silly, twisted mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I gotta get over to get to Ken's place to go to the prom with him. And I just couldn't figure out how to do that. It just wouldn't let me go in anywhere. Every home I would try to go to would be my own. So it took a minute for it to sink in that, oh, this is just about shopping. There is no objective. There are no points. It's just, you just drive around town and there's only 4 stores or something, and you just go shopping and get your hair done. Oh, that's lovely. And the hand that you use to control with, I didn't realize it at first because I was so hung up on what is the point of this game that I didn't realize that the hand and the way it sits on the screen, that if I would cross certain areas of the mannequins or Barbie herself, it looked a little dirty. And so it didn't quite sink in at first, but I wound up doing that. And I did another bit. If you're listening carefully, I just put in the sound of scissors taking a single snip as I drag the hand across Barbie's midriff, just because I can. The Britney Spears thing. This is actually a lot longer. It seems like it was probably around at least 5 minutes. but I had to cut it down just in the name of keeping things going. A lot of these could have been a lot longer. Barbie could have been a lot longer, but the Britney Spears one, I wound up having to take hard cuts just to try and keep things musically going so it wouldn't seem too abrupt. And there was only one really egregiously awful slide in there, and that was the opening one with the Entertainment Tonight logo on it, which was funny. But again, it was just another one of those, okay, this is a thing. And the Sid player, this was actually kind of fun. Even though you don't play anything, you don't do anything, you just listen to music. It's kind of cool to hear these Commodore 64 8-bit versions of these, mostly then recent hits. Now, I chose Easy Lover for that one because it had the sharpest melody, because I was noticing a lot of rock music. It tends to be, for the verses at least, just the singer just kind of farting out the words, and it's not really a distinctive tune. And so I wound up just deliberately picking out the most sharply melodic thing. So that was that. And then this game, what was this called? Catch Them Up? Something to that effect. And it's really sad. This is really a very addictive game, but it's a game that you can't even win because the great floating butt, sometimes it just goes so far away that no matter what you do, you just cannot catch up. But I wound up playing that game longer than I cared to admit before I finally realized that you just can't win that game. Let's see here. I know I get into something else here. Back to business. Oh yes, the strip poker game. So I wound up actually playing this, and I eventually beat it. It was a lot more challenging than the Philips CDI one, but I was kind of on the fence about it. I knew in the name of due diligence that I had to play the game just to see the outcome, but I'll just say straight up, it's not like the Philips CDI game where it is just so awful that you just can't turn away. This one, it's a lot more challenging, it's a lot more consistent, and you're always playing against women. And just so you know, that has no real bearing on it, but it's just a much more challenging and a much more straightforward game. And being the Commodore 64 and that kind of pixelated graphic, there's no movement. So it's always just stills. And sometimes the pixels would get so big that you couldn't quite make heads or tails of what you were actually seeing. And I thought about throwing it in, but in the end, I knew there was going to be a lot of adult stuff, as I mentioned, and it just seemed like, I don't think we need to do a second strip poker game for Archive, unless I find some just really awful one, but I don't think I'm going to top the CDI one. Now, let's see here. The Dr. Ruth game. I had already done this segment, but I actually wound up with a hard copy of this from Ben. This is one of the ones he sent me, but this was played on an emulator. I had done this ahead of time. And when I was playing it, I realized that you'd think for all the sex jokes on Archive that I'd probably be a little better at this, but a lot of these were my genuine stabs at it. As it wears on, you could tell that I was intentionally picking the wrong answers. But these first, I think, two questions, I was really going, okay, well, ingesting somebody's bodily fluid does not sound like a healthy thing to me, so I would say that's probably what you should not do. And of course, I'm just not that smart, apparently. Now, a little bit of a goof in here, but it was a goof I couldn't do anything about because I had to play this game straight through about 4 times and record it. And because I was just trying to get the really out there questions, and I wound up, you see that my score keeps fluctuating, so it's not all from the same gameplay, and that's how I go from having all these wrong answers to yet just magically being the high score. So that's how that happened. And then the moans, which comes up next. That's the whole game. It's not even a game. It's just a loop. It's just a data set loading screen, even though it's not from a data set, I don't think. And it just loops And that's all it is. It's just this, I guess you could say four measure. I think there's four moans, and it just loops over and over and over again. And I had the goofy idea after I did this and I was doing the filming to just pour salt in the wound, and I'll just read 50 Shades of Grey again. So yeah. And then the final game, I guess I have to discuss this a bit. Commie Bob. I was just. It was another one of those games that I wasn't too shocked. I've seen a lot of really shocking stuff doing archive, so it's gotten to a point where it's a lot harder to get to me. But when I first saw it, it was just like, oh, geez. And it was another one of those, why does this exist? And you can win this game if you, what shall I say, boink the cat enough. And the way I censor this, by the way, is I wound up, I couldn't quite get the timing right on moving across the screen with him and the proper size of a black box. So I just put a bunch of black boxes together. So no, his penis is not that big. It's just, it was trying to just make it not have this big pixelated sausage sticking out. I'm such a classy guy. But you can win the game. If you boink the cat fast enough, you win. But if you don't, mom comes in and shoots you and kills you. So I guess there's an objective to it. I guess I have to give it that much. Oh well. Episode's just about over here, so I guess I'm gonna sign off here. Ben, from the archive, really hoping that if I am still doing archive at episode 1000, that it's not quite that depressing. I'll see you again soon. 100th trip through the great audiovisual landfill. And here's to another 100. Oh, God.